So thank you everybody for joining us for the recap of the Service Innovation Summit 2026, which took place in Scottsdale, Arizona at the very cool and unique Hotel Valley Ho, which was really additive to the overall experience being in such a unique location and a unique hotel. As always, the summit is about meeting people and getting to know people. It was especially true this year with the overwhelming discussions that take place every single day, everywhere about automation and machines and AI. So, getting some humans into a room, focusing on the future and working together was really quite an experience. And everybody showed up with such enthusiasm, openness, sharing, building relationships. Every time there was a break, there were just groups of 10 people talking, sharing stories, laughing. It was really a spectacular time. And thank you to everybody that attended. It's you that make the event special. The consortium is a not-for-profit industry association made up of about 65 member companies, and the summit is an opportunity for us to, one, celebrate all of the people that make the consortium a success and are a part of our membership, but also to engage with a lot of people across the industry to talk about what's been done over the last year and where we're going in the next year. We had a great group of people that came together and got to share, again, experiences and build relationships. So we had a wonderful rooftop reception overlooking the Arizona desert at sunset. And there are a lot of great pictures of people and the sunset taking place. So a great way to kick off the event. And then every time, like I said, you looked around, there were pods of people talking, people engaging, and people looking to share their experiences and learn from each other. We had 117 people actually at the event. We had more register, but as always, a few people can't make it last minute, representing 56 companies. And we had 52 first-time attendees. I'm always amazed when we have so many first-time attendees at one of our events. It also was, to my knowledge, the largest gathering of certified people at a consortium event. So 81 people there held some sort of certification from the consortium, but 55 people are V6 practices certified, which the level of expertise, the level of detail, the level of knowledge in the room was pretty outstanding. And it is great to see so many practitioners coming together and getting to experience the summit, many of them for the first time. A lot of the people that were practice certified had recently become practice certified. So thank you to everybody once again for attending and for the expertise that were in the room together. Over the course of the 2.5 days, we had 17 hosted sessions from 13 different companies. And we'll do a bit of a deep dive into those sessions and talk a little bit about each one. Kind of four main, I'd say, themes from the hosted sessions. The shifting value that we're all feeling in support and services organizations, and how are we going to deal with that shifting value, was a big topic. The reality of AI. We've moved from 2 years ago, what is this Gen AI thing? What are we going to do with it? Last year, very much experimental, people saying, hey, we're testing things, we're playing with things, we're struggling with the technology. This year was a lot of, this is what we're doing with it. These are the results we're seeing. These are the struggles we're having. So there is a big reality of AI that was discussed at the summit. Measuring and communicating. So measurements and how we communicate those measurements is always a big topic. And we're definitely moving forward with some new models and frameworks to help us with measuring and communicating. So another big theme from those sessions. And obviously, I think at this point, everybody has seen that KCS has moved to knowledge-centered success and what that next era looks like, and the reframing of KCS and the new release of KCS that was announced at the summit. Then we had open space, always an energetic day, a very tiring day. There is so much to try and absorb on open space day, but we explored 30 different topics. Pretty similar to the hosted sessions, which isn't that much of a surprise, since these are things that are on everybody's mind. But a little bit more about what is the future of AI and the impacts it's going to have. Some of that is around the people and development and value based on where are we going with AI and what do we need to do with our teams. KCS strategy and evolution as our tools, technologies, the way knowledge is curated is changing pretty dramatically. What does that mean for the strategy of how we're going to leverage KCS and what the evolution of KCS continues to look like? And operational agility. We have to be far more agile today than ever before. And what does that actually look like? And then countless connections. We have a lot of great photos. I've been emailing people randomly when I come across a photo of them talking. So you might see more photos from me coming in the next weeks as I go through all of the stuff we have. But the summit is about people coming together more than anything else. It is about making new friends, making new connections that you can leverage to make your company successful, yourself successful, to grow careers, and to meet new people, which is always a foundation for what we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to talk about the sessions individually a little bit later, but this is a bit of a snapshot of day one. So in the morning of day one is all together and a little bit of context setting by myself. And then we had a great presentation from Fred Prezillo from the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, which was very connected to the work we're doing and the way we're thinking, but from a completely different perspective, which was very fun to witness. And then Jeff Elzer, turning AI hype into measurable business value. So Jeff took us through really some details on what is agentic AI, how does it work, and how do we think about it in the future, which was based on a 3-part series he did. And then Kelly bringing us kind of to a conclusion before lunch on the next era of KCS, kind of the first look at what we've done. In the afternoon, there's 2 breakout sessions that take place simultaneously. In the first room, we had it was a nice flow from Marco at Splunk to Tab at Cisco, and since Splunk was acquired by Cisco, a bit of how they're bringing together their KCS programs, leveraging AI, and what does that look like as Splunk and Cisco move forward to rolling out KCS in a very, very large environment. I forget the number, but I think Tab said it was something like 7,000 people across the Cisco enterprise that they're going to be trying to roll KCS out to. So a pretty large implementation. And then Monique, Ping Identity, has a great story about getting executive buy-in to AI programs and how to leverage AI. So a great story, very much aligned to the AI blueprint and the amount of planning it takes to be successful with AI. It is not magic. In the other room, a little bit more focus on some of the people aspects of organizations. So coaching considerations by Lana and Francisca, and also talking about some of the new coaching materials that we have. Smarsh, Janine, and Steve talking about, rethinking how customers get help. And some very interesting things have been done at Smarsh about getting people to the right channel at the right time to get help. And we ended with Brad taking us through the importance of a coherent organization. And there's a follow-up discussion about coherent organizations taking place. Some really new, interesting thinking that ties very much into how we're starting to change the value story of support and service organizations. Day 2 is open space, and Kelly will dive into open space a little bit. And then on day 3, we started with an executive interview with Helen and Andrew. So thinking about how do we lead teams through this rapid evolution and through these adaptive organizations. So some great stories from Helen and Andrew. Christina, Albert, and Mark took us through measuring and communicating value. So some new work, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then closing the loop out and how are we changing our story moving forward. So action-packed 2.5 days of content. We also announced 2 new innovators. So Albert Miles from Red Hat and Jeff Elzer from Oracle. Both Albert and Jeff have been engaged with the consortium for a very long time and have contributed significantly to the bodies of work. Jeff has really been at the forefront of artificial intelligence, machine learning for a very long time, and has presented on the topic for years. He appears more than 200 times in the consortium library for attending events, presenting, delivering material. So just has had a massive impact on the work of the consortium, especially around AI. Similarly, Albert had a big impact on the AI blueprint, and some of his work at Red Hat is what was foundational to the AI blueprint. And Albert is also somebody who, no matter when you call him, no matter what you ask him to do, he always says yes. I don't think he's ever said no to anything we've ever asked of him when we have a new member that is looking for somebody to talk to, or if we need somebody to present on a topic. Albert is always there. He's always building relationships and is somebody who has made us really think through what it means to be part of the consortium and a contributor to the consortium. So congratulations to the both of them, and thank you for all the work that they've done to contribute to the consortium over the last several years. We also had a great dinner, which was sponsored by Coveo and eGain. So thank you to them for helping us put on a great dinner. It was under the lights and the lawn and outside in the Arizona desert. Just an absolutely beautiful night with great friends, great food. Everybody loved the food at the event. The food was spectacular at the venue. And thank you again to Coveo and eGain for sponsoring our dinner. So now to dive just a little bit into some of the sessions and the content we covered. We started with the shifting value of support and how do we think about support as the company value engine and what's driving the change and how we have to think about support and support services. And I think we all know that we're in this period of rapid change. Support has always been a period of change, but we are moving from very experimental innovation to very large scale intelligent infrastructure. And this change is driving a lot of behavior changes, mindset changes, technology changes, value changes across the support landscape. And so, how do we have to think about that? And we're hearing about how AI is transforming business every day, all the time, all things everywhere, all the time, all at once. That narrative, though, is being driven by big vendors who are spending huge money to try and control the AI market, all the large consultancies that basically make huge revenue from AI managed services, strategy, and large scale marketing, where companies are rewarded by appearing to be AI first. So, this narrative that if your business model hasn't already transformed and you're not transforming in every aspect of your job, you're falling behind. But that narrative isn't really the reality. And even McKinsey is saying that we're hitting this kind of end to the hype, right? That there's a reality check because we're kind of stuck in POC purgatory where 70 to 80% of AI initiatives are failing due to things that we've been talking about: poor data quality, high hidden costs, and really an unclear strategy. So there is a bit of a reality check in 2026 on what are we doing with AI and where is it actually going to impact us. That does not mean that AI is not having a pretty big impact because we're seeing it. So we're seeing the wave and we're feeling the wave across the support and services industry, where we have a lot of examples now of how AI is assisting us to do our knowledge work, whether it's auto article creation or curation, right? We're seeing knowledge work being impacted by AI in very positive ways. Lots of adapting customer experiences. I said it's adapting because I think some of it is good and I'm enjoying some of those experiences now that I have them, but there's a lot that I don't experience very good. And I had the pleasure of having to use a AI assisted phone conversational thing, and I was about to throw my phone into the ocean. It was so frustrating trying to deal with it because it couldn't handle any exceptions, right? So, but we know it's impacting the customer experience through self-service, through chatbots, all of these things. We're seeing a lot of augmenting of human capabilities, especially when it comes to how do we write articles, how do we do research. So we're augmenting human capabilities all the time. And the way it's automating work is at a blistering pace with vendors coming out with new solutions all the time. There are between 100 and 200,000 companies that say they're AI companies, depending on whether they're an AI native company or rebranding as an AI company, although I think you could argue every company is an AI company these days. But the complexity of work that these tools can do is getting, more and more every day. So we're seeing it and the wave is here. So what does this mean for us? So we talked a little bit about where support is and where support's going. And if we think about the modern support model, it really has been focused on the help desk. And how do we take tickets? How do we automate that? What does self-service look like? Really task level operational efficiency is what it has been about. So starting in the late 80s, early 90s, when support centers really started to take off with really the advent of personal computers helped drive that entire industry. but it was about task level operational efficiency. I think today we're in this world of human and AI friction. So we're not really clear what the impacts of AI are going to be on our organizations and our people. It is changing things rapidly. We're hearing more and more about the skill gaps that exist. People are more disengaged than ever. So Gallup's State of the Workforce report shows an all-time low in engagement from employees. So people are feeling the impact, right? People once again are absorbing the friction of rapid technology change, and we're expecting people to absorb that. But we're still focused on task level operational efficiency. So we're still looking at all these tools as just how do we make things more efficient? And, we're hearing from CEOs about all the great layoffs they can do to save money because of AI and how AI should be able to make you 10, 20, 30 times more efficient. So it really is focused on efficiency. It's not focused on growth. It's not focused on how do we actually deliver a better experience. So I would say that the modern support model and the transition we're in now has been about managing liability. And our organizations have been looked at as how are they managing liability? And as much as we talk about customer success, as much as we talk about making it so that the company is more successful because customers are more successful, support organizations have been about efficiency and managing liability. Now that has to change. And moving forward in the emerging support model, we know it's going to be an AI native environment, which means it's going to be human first because AI native is going to become a commodity. And so it's going to be about the relationships we have, and relationships will dominate. And what's going to differentiate support organizations will be continuous evolving partnerships. And that's what's going to be our competitive advantage. Not that we have a faster tool, not that we have more AI in place, because like most self-service and internet tools these days, they are a commodity that everybody has. So moving forward, we really need to start thinking much more about this idea of we're co-creating value with our company, for the company, and for our customers. And what does that kind of look like? Is something that we need to start to vocalize, talk about, and think about our narrative, because our organizations are huge value drivers, and we need to kind of stop keeping that value a secret. But no one will change the story for us. And over the last 9 to 12 months, we've had some very interesting discussions, some led by marketing executives, talking about how do you change the narrative of your organization or yourself, because nobody else will do it. No other organization is going to come start saying, oh, I see a different value in this organization. We have to change that narrative. And so how will we change that story? So when we think about the role of support, there is value for the customer, and we've always talked about value for the customer. What is it that support's doing that's delivering value to the customer? What we haven't talked about as much is what's the support value back to the company, and what can we offer to the company? And we have to realize that these two things are not equal. The value we deliver to the customer and the value we deliver to the company are not the exact same thing, but they are incredibly related, and they make up our entire value story. When we think about our value story and what it means for the customer and what it means for the company, we've been developing an iteration of the value stack, which is a model that we've used for years. But really breaking it down to think about, well, what is the role of support? And at the base, we're about ensuring business continuity, both for the customer and the company. Then we want to simplify the interactions and simplify things for the company and the customer. Then we start talking about maximizing success and building trusted partnerships. We have a whole bunch of work going on to detail this out. We have a lot of details on it. We don't have time today I could spend the entire hour talking about these two value stacks and what all the language means and everything. But I think one of the important things is when we get to the maximizing success. So at the base level, right, being a problem solver and a shock absorber, those are the kind of base things that you have to be good at as a support organization. And as we go up the pyramids, it looks kind of like the value growth is linear, but when we get to maximizing success, there is a incremental change in the value we can provide, especially back into the company, because this is where we can leverage all of our knowledge that we've created, all of the things we know about our customers to go power the rest of the company, because we have more knowledge and intelligence about what customers are doing and the problems they're having than anybody else. And we have the true voice of the customer, not customer satisfaction surveys and NPS scores and those types of things, but we know the language customers are using and we know what they're actually trying to accomplish. We hide that value from the rest of the company instead of empowering the rest of the company. So how do we go get in front of sales and marketing and product development and all these other organizations with everything we know and deliver it to them in a way that is meaningful to them? But in order to do that, we have to have a high level of trust both within the company and the customer, and we have to have business acumen. We have to understand what they're looking for more than what we're looking for. If we show up at product development and say, here's a list of bugs that if you fix these, I know our customers are going to get better. The reaction is, okay, where do I fit that into the millions of other things I'm being asked to do? How do we position it from how does this make marketing more successful, sales more successful, and product more successful? So looking at it through their eyes, which means we have to have high level of trust with them and we have to have a lot of business acumen. We've been encouraging people across the services organizations to go make new best friends across the company because that's the only way that we're going to break some of this cycle. We also talked about how do we simplify this when we go out and talk to the rest of the organizations? We're not using our own language, we're using their language. And at the base starting point for the customer, we're resolving your immediate pain. So we're making it so that you are up and running. And when you hit a problem, we're there to solve it and get you back up and running. To the company, we're absorbing operational stress. We don't want the rest of the company to know about the daily pain points customers are having. We don't want them calling marketing or their sales account managers for simplistic problems. That is literally the role that support has to play. So at the very base, we're absorbing operational stress for the company and resolving immediate pain for our customer. The middle layers are about making it so our customers can optimize what they've bought from us, and we're really a return on investment. So you're spending a bunch of money with our company for a product or a service. We want to make sure you're getting a return on that investment. And our role is making sure you get that by optimizing what you're doing, understanding what you're trying to accomplish, and being that translator for you to make sure that you're getting your money's worth. Boy, internal to the company, it's about driving efficiency and driving actionable insight. So we're giving you all of our information and knowledge to make sure that we are making the company more efficient and giving you actionable insights to go drive change. At the very top, we are building strategic loyalty with our customer. They see us as a fierce defender of them. And internally, we're helping with financials and with brand growth. So how are we going to attach all of our actionable insights, all of our knowledge, all of what we're doing directly to revenue growth, revenue retention, and growing the brand of our company? So how we talk about ourselves has to change. And this is a bit of a model to help us think through that. But a big point of all of this is we have to look at it from an outside-in perspective. It can't be about what's good for the support organization. It has to be good for everybody else. And this idea that the underlying human question that drives whether we think we're getting value is, does this organization see me and care about my success? And I would argue today, if we went out to other organizations across the company and said, hey, marketing, do you feel that the support organization really understands you and sees you and they care about your success? I think we'd be hard pressed to say, yes, we're spending our time doing that, but that's what we have to start doing. The good thing is we have all the building blocks to do this. So when we think about knowledge-centered work, so all the work we do around knowledge, so we're about optimizing the customer and the company value by leveraging everything that we know. And we need them to leverage everything that we know. We shouldn't be hiding our knowledge bases. We shouldn't be locking them down. We should be opening them up for anybody in the company to mine and do whatever they want with it. When we think about intelligent swarming and leadership in an adaptive organization, we're accelerating cross-organizational trust, not just within our organization, but across the entire enterprise. We're making it easier to collaborate, and we're also developing talent for the rest of the company to tap into. And then the predictive customer engagement is about how do we achieve those unmatched gains by leveraging all these great automation technologies powered by AI. So we have all the building blocks in place. So that was a little bit of the context setting. That session alone took an hour, so there's a lot more detail behind all those slides and the verbiage that's being used. And after that, we had Fred Prezillo from the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation talk to us about the importance of context and a sense of place, which is what Frank Lloyd Wright was all about. And I just pulled a few things from the presentation because, like I said earlier, it was a bit tangential, but boy, did it ring true when he was talking about how Wright really thought that the context you're in should drive the content, which we talk about all the time. That experience, his experiences formed who he became as an architect. And it was early in American history, right? So he was early in the ideal of America. And he didn't want to have American architecture just be built on what was going on in Europe or European architecture. He wanted America to have its own style. And because of his growing up on a farm, he very much wanted to kind of represent that in his designs. He was a big believer that learning is by doing. So when he had his school and would have apprentices come, they would spend their first year or something like that on construction sites, learning how to build things, learning how to work with concrete, because he didn't think you could be a good architect if you didn't know how construction techniques work. So you had to be learning things by actually doing things, which we reference all the time, that our experiences, we want to capture the experiences and then have other people learn from those experiences. And the experience informs the architect. So the experiences you have is what forms you as somebody moving forward. And this idea that he was really about the practical implementation of ideas led to innovation, which I thought was a bit insightful, because we talk about innovation is never a big bang. There is no moment where somebody's like, I just innovated on everything and it's something brand new and nobody else has ever thought of this. Innovation is something that comes by building on other people's thoughts. And it is about this practical implementation of ideas that leads and sparks new innovations. And looping it back into changing our story, he would often design and have furniture built in that couldn't be moved. And so he did that so that when you were sitting in the furniture, you had the view he wanted you to have. So the view would be out the window looking at nature, or looking at a framed structure that framed the nature in the background of a mountain or something. And so he kind of forced you to have the narrative he wanted you to have based on his design, which really resonated with me, because we have to control our own narrative. We have to control our new narrative, and we're the only ones who can do that. And Wright did that in his designs, and he did it in his construction techniques to control the narrative of what the user of his space was seeing and what the user of his space was thinking. So after that, which expanded our mind a little bit, Jeff Elzer went deep into kind of the value that you can get from AI and how you turn that hype into something that is a measurable business value. And this was based on a 3-part agentic series that Jeff did with us. So he took that 3-part series and kind of condensed it down into a 45-minute or 40-minute talk track. So what I really took away from that is that, one, you need to have structured content. So AI agents are only as effective as the content, the practices, and the governance that supports them. So this is not magic. It is not you just point something at a knowledge base and magic happens and all of a sudden it works perfectly. It takes curation and it takes forethought. And when you think about the principles of an adaptive organization and the principles of KCS, the methodology of KCS and what KCS does, that enables AI to be far more effective. And Jeff took us through, though, how those principles expand across an entire enterprise. And it's not just in support, but these models, these principles work across pretty much any organization. And the example he used was an ERP example. So it wasn't even a support example that he used to kind of show how these principles work. So great discussion by Jeff. The 3-part agentic series is in the member wiki, and it goes deep into, one, how these agents work, the things you need to think about, and the value you can get out of them. So it was a intense presentation by Jeff with a lot of content, but at the end, it really highlighted that this stuff is just another change. The technology is here, we can do it. And if you're really focused in on KCS and knowledge management, you're already ahead of the game in how to leverage these tools. And we finished just before lunch with the announcement of the change from knowledge-centered service to knowledge-centered success. And this really reflects that what we're seeing across members and what we're seeing across the industry is that KCS can be applied as a much broader knowledge management framework than it has been applied in the past. And it really isn't about just services anymore. It's about success across the enterprise. So there are some changes that took place in the ordering of the solve loop because we want to use what we know first, then we want to improve it, then we want to capture and think about structure. So a little bit of a change to the order. Some name changes on the evolve side. But mostly the idea behind moving to knowledge center success is this idea that we want to have agility at scale and we want all of our enterprise knowledge to enable our collaboration across different organizations in the enterprise. The knowledge patterns that we have from the solve loop, those data-driven insights are the gold of KCS. And the evolve loop to me is becoming a far more important thing for people to think about. People have kind of started with the solve loop to build out the knowledge. But boy, do we have to get really good at the evolve loop to get the value out of the practice. And we know that it is driving reliable AI automation because it builds and validates content, it's demand driven, it prevents errors, it builds user trust, all of the great things that we've talked about forever around KCS helps us drive AI automation. So this idea that you don't need knowledge bases, I haven't seen anything that proves that out to me. So I think that in the end of the day, for AI to be really effective, you need to build out that knowledge base. And the evolution of KCS reflects how we start to think about that knowledge management practice in a much broader sense. There is a timeline for this. So at Summit, we released the new practices guide, but we have about a year's worth of work ahead of us to update everything else when it comes to our fundamentals training getting updated and the courses. Then we need to build out the new training and update the training and the practices workshop material, create a bridge exam. The idea is by Summit 27, so about a year, it'll take us to update all of the materials and things like the adoption guide, all of the other material around KCS to get all of that updated. So there is a bit of a timeline here for us getting these things done. And then we're shifting. So KCS doesn't have a version number on it anymore. So it's not Knowledge Center Success version 7. It is just Knowledge Centered Success. The certifications are going to be how we version it. And so we're going to be releasing new certifications every 2 years with bridges to go from one certification to the next certification. But the impacts and the methodology has been evolving so rapidly that this will be a better way for us to make sure that we're staying up on the time. And so on May 20th, Kelly will be hosting a session to go deeper into the changes for KCS and what all that means. So if you have questions about it, May 20th is where you want to be. All right, Kelly, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about some of the breakout sessions.
Great news. We are halfway through the first day of Summit. So one of the things that we really try to do intentionally at Summit is build a container that helps people sort of think about how they might change their inputs so that they might change their outputs, right? So the things that we're learning and hearing about happen in sort of a sequential order. So Matt started the morning with context about kind of the big picture. And then we talked about context of the place that we are in, the actual sort of context of the place. That's Frank Lloyd Wright had his architecture school in the wintertime in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is part of the reason why we had our friend Fred come and talk to us about his approach. Jeff talked about how the sort of the context of AI is relevant for KCS and intelligent swarming, how those things interplay. And then I talked a little bit about how this next era of KCS makes KCS relevant in any context. So after lunch, we ran 2 consecutive sessions. We had 3 rooms, so we had 2 rooms going, 3 sessions in each. And this was when we start hearing about how members are using all of these new tools and approaches and frameworks and methodologies in their specific environments. So we had 6 sessions. Matt talked through them briefly earlier. It was really fun to have Splunk and Cisco come talk about their situation. Marco went first. He talked about his time at Splunk. They were just acquired by Cisco, and so had access to a ton of AI tools, lots and lots of models. Where some of us are granted access to just 1 or 2 models, they have lots of models to play with. But they leveraged their very robust KCS implementation. And got to turn on a bunch of AI tools on top of that. And the mandate for them was to explore and experiment what they could get done. They really found that their existing structure helped make it successful. They really found that they needed to look before they leapt in terms of making a plan before applying any of those sort of fun tools and automation capabilities at scale. And then Marco and Tab, who spoke from Cisco, they're in the middle of a huge merger. And so they're in the middle of figuring out how their KCS programs are going to work together. They're going to re-roll out KCS at Cisco across about 7,000 TAC engineers in the next year or two. And so Tab found himself sort of in the position of maybe accidentally being kind of the leader or the organizer of collecting people's experience and feedback on how they're going to use AI and KCS at the same time. So that was a wonderful conversation in terms of the way that they're approaching that. And he's excited about working on how that is different for huge organizations. So we also had Monique from Ping talk about how they built an AI program that their executives really could believe in. The things that they found important were, again, it turns out structure ahead of time, like a KCS implementation that is functioning and healthy gives you a huge leg up on implementing any of these things. So having some foundations in place is very helpful. Choosing and figuring out how you're going to prove your high value use cases makes those things defensible. And then really thinking about how they were measuring and communicating the story based on what the executives were caring about was a great lesson, sort of wrapped up quite nicely by Monique. Almost concurrently, Smarsh, as Matt talked about earlier, told us a wonderful story about how, although they had the best of intentions, they took a step back and looked at how complicated they had accidentally made their customer experience in getting self-help. And they started this project sort of with attempting to use a fresh set of eyes in terms of how someone who was going through this process might experience it. Based on that experience, they designed a much cleaner, tighter get help experience. And again, there's a common theme here. Because they had a robust and healthy KCS implementation, they really could leverage a lot of the things they learned from that and a lot of the processes that they had in place to help direct customers to the most effective support channel, and then to redesign the feedback mechanism to make sure that that was really working. So it turns out that people, process, and knowledge are key enablers for success in any number of different scenarios. Lana and Francisca from Upland used the GROW model on their own internal coaching program. Did a really lovely sort of walking through of here's where we are, here's where we wish we could be, and here's what we're going to do about it next. They talked a lot about how coaches really are the way we sort of sustain change, and one of the ways that we build kind of emotional capacity in our organizations, especially through times of great uncertainty. And they also introduced the brand new KCS Coach Reference Guide, which is available. This is a resource that was built based on lots of member experience and also includes the previously published Handling Doubts and Misconceptions. And it's for people who are in the role of a coach. So it talks a little bit about coach skills, how to build a coaching program, really sets those individuals up for success. And Brad Smith talked about the importance of a coherent organization. So this is a little bit of a new approach to thinking about how we might identify and act on company culture, but more than that, sort of the field in which a group of people finds themselves. So one of the things that Fred talked about in terms of one of the ways Frank Lloyd Wright taught architecture is that the geometry of the site informs the geometry of the building. And in this scenario, the geometry of the field of the group of people that is working on any given initiative really affects the geometry of the output of that field. So it's hard to do something with a group of people that is fundamentally different from sort of the vibes that that group has. So lots in here about leadership, about the way leaders show up and how they affect sort of the field of a room. And the one of the most interesting sort of things about this is, right, AI does not have an agenda. AI reflects your agenda back to you with precision. So if we're really going to try to do things at scale from an AI perspective, if we're really going to build prompts and programs and have AI respond to things on our behalf, we really need to think about what the inputs are because it will be reflected back to the people using that program. So this is how we set up this. Now we have reached the end of Tuesday. And this, we went to dinner. We had a lovely time. And then on Wednesday morning, we got together in an redesigned meeting room. We crammed inside. And together we built the agenda for Wednesday. So we had 4 time slots. We had 7.5 dedicated spaces, and we did open space. And the way that this works is we spend about 45 minutes setting up the grid. Everyone in the room has an opportunity to nominate a topic. If you nominate a topic, you are willing to start the conversation and find someone to take notes. So it's a very analog day. The rules of participating mostly include making the most of your day for yourself. And so people presented all kinds of topics, and we'll look at kind of some of the themes here in a minute. And then we split up for the day. And so people got to sort of choose their own adventure through the conversations that were happening all over the property, which was really fun. You will not be surprised to hear that some of the big themes included AI integration and strategic implementation. Lots of talking about what's happening in the world, what might happen next in terms of those things. One of the topics that came up that we'll do some follow-up work on is establishing an AI council, kind of the same idea as a KCS council, but for AI projects and programs across the organization. Lots of conversations about evolving the workforce and human value. So how are humans going to be involved? How can we support humans being involved? How are the roles going to shift? If in fact AI allows us to have additional capacity, what might we do with that capacity? KCS strategy and governance. So KCS is a very popular conversation during open space sessions because it's really a time for the 115 folks to talk to each other about what's happening in their implementations. And then an evergreen topic, redefining value and metrics. So how are we talking about the things that we're learning? And how do we get people to stop being so obsessed with activity metrics? That's so. The other things that came out of open space that will get follow-up topics are both the KCS Center of Excellence. So how you might roll out KCS across really large enterprises. That exists currently in the adoption guide, but we're looking forward to updating some of that guidance. And then work around knowledge domain analysis, which has become knowledge optimization in the most recent practices guide. So what does that mean? How is AI related or used, or how does that work? Who might be involved? Those are things that we're looking forward to continuing to work on over this next year.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. I think open space is such a fun day. And then we end it with the readouts and cocktail reception so that we get to hear what all the different sessions were with the two-sentence readout. So on day three, we kind of bring things together and wrap things up. We start the day with an executive interview with Helen and Andrew, Helen from Twilio and Andrew from Rapid7. Both are senior leaders in their organizations, very focused on change and people and the impacts on people. So great discussions, lots of funny stories from them and great insights from them that really are setting the foundation for the fact that we are living still in a people world, and we need to be thinking about people, managing people, and leading through this time of rapid evolution. Then we had Christina Rosen, Mark Churchill, and Albert Miles talk a little bit about an ongoing body of work that actually started in 2019 with the Measuring Self-Service Success, which turned into Understanding Success by Channel, which has matured into Measuring and Communicating Value. And this is an ongoing consortium member working team with about 30 people from 19 different companies contributing to this body of work. And the output has been a value map, which is a very flexible framework for how do we tell a story with the information we have. And it's very adaptable to different organizations, very adaptable to the changing environment that we are in. And the value map starts with our data at the bottom and who owns the data, who trusts the data, where does the data live, all the things we have to care about in our data world. Then going up to what are the repeatable evidences that we can produce from this data? So what are the signals and the measures that we can get from this data? That leads to results, insights, and recommendations. So now that we're understanding and we're seeing some evidence from our measures and our signals, what is the impact we can have with that? What story can we start to think about telling? And then how do we deliver that? So what makes it easy for people to understand? And I love this. What makes it hard for people to ignore what we're saying? And that's something that Christina really leans into, that when we're delivering this, we don't just want to make it so somebody can understand it. We want to make it so they can't ignore it. It is so valuable and so much a part of our story that you can't ignore what we're saying. At the very top of the pyramid is the audience, and who needs to understand the value of our information and the story we're trying to tell? What is their role and what are they focused on and what biases exist in that organization? So a really nice structured way to think about going from the data we own and who owns the data and where the data exists up to who are we trying to tell the story to and what do they care about? And this is not a linear process. So we can start with what story do we need to tell for a specific audience, and then how do we go find the data to tell that story, as well as what can we mine from our data to go tell a story. So a great framework, but it's not just a pretty pyramid. There's a lot of work behind the pretty pyramid. So we have content that is being produced around practical how-tos, templates that can be used, real-world examples from member companies, all the AI considerations for how we can use AI to go get data and do things with data. So there's a lot of content behind the pyramid and the talk track. And it's still a few months away, but in September, there will be an event on measuring what matters. So this idea of shifting support as the company value engine, and how do we move beyond numbers to tell the story that really drives trust, scale, and revenue impact. So it's 4 hour, 3.5 hour event that is scheduled for September. So it's something that I highly recommend trying to attend. And again, we'll keep an eye out for all the templates and the ongoing body of work. This group is still meeting, so it's not done, right? This is something that will always be evolving. But Christina has done a great job with those 30 people and all those members to really drive a new narrative, which has been something that is going to be very valuable for people to leverage. And we kind of ended the event thinking about it is a great time for reinvention. It isn't just a great time for thinking about AI and automation, but it's a great time for us to reinvent who we are, reinvent how we talk about our organizations, and reinvent the way we deliver value from our organizations. And so we started the day talking about, or started the summit talking about that support has to change to be relevant. Otherwise, we're just going to be continued to be seen as an organization to manage corporate liability, not an organization that can co-create and drive value. So we have to change the story of how we're talking about ourselves. Great examples of that we control our own narrative and that we have to build the bench where we want people looking and not let them decide where they want to sit. So we have to be driving the narrative. We have to be driving the message, not just accepting the message that has been told about sport since the 1980s. And then we have the building blocks, and those building blocks are always evolving. And I think KCS is a great example that the building blocks are always moving, always being updated, whether it's KCS, intelligent swarming, adaptive organizations. These are models and ideas and concepts that are always iterating and moving with the industry and a few steps ahead of the industry, but we have the building blocks to change the way our organizations work and change the way that we think about our organizations. We spent 3.5 days having examples, great discussions about all the innovations that are taking place that will help us drive changes in how we think about support, drive the changes in how we control the narrative, and drive changes into the models, methodologies, tools, technology, and everything else that we're using to deliver that value back out to the customer and the company. And now we have a new model for how we can communicate our value narrative and think about the customer value, but also the company value. And diving into the company value, I think today is more important than continuing to iterate on customer value. But how do we really, truly go talk about and deliver new value back into the company? And we have a new framework to structure that value narrative. So all the pieces have kind of come together, and the summit really explored all of these pieces coming together to change who we are, change how we're working, and change the value story around the things that our organizations are doing. So we want you to come and continue to work on these things with us, to have more discussions about all of these topics. None of it is static. Tomorrow, we'll be diving a little bit more into the coherent organization. So Brad is going to be hosting that discussion. Then we're going to have the next era of KCS. So Kelly will be hosting that. We have a public event in June. I see that Kai is on the call today, but a KCS in action. We'll be hosting a in-person member-only event. Red Hat will be hosting us in Raleigh to dive more into knowledge with AI, knowledge from AI, and knowledge for AI. So that will be a event where we go pretty deep into some of the AI technologies, use cases, and how we're thinking about knowledge management across those things. And almost most importantly is putting on your calendars for Summit 2027. So Summit 2027 will be in Boulder, Colorado at the brand new Limelight Hotel, April 26th through 29th, where we will explore all the amazing things that have happened in the upcoming year and then look to 2028 and beyond and what's going on in our industry. So that is a very rapid, fast-paced review of what took place over the 2.5 days in Arizona. And again, I'd like to thank everybody that attended the event and made it so special and showed up really looking to participate, engage, and be present as humans together in the location, as well as all the people that are on the phone today and all the people that contribute to the different consortium models, methodologies, and talk tracks through all the various forms that we have throughout the year. And I look forward to seeing you all next year in Boulder.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you today.